Welcome to SpyHards podcast. This is episode 2 of our SpyMaster interview series. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam, the provocateur.
And Cam, what have we got for everyone this week?
Well, Scott, I think I may have to change your name to Spy Catcher Scott, because you have landed on another great get for us. We are going to talk this week to Rawson Marshall Thurber, the director and co-writer of Central Intelligence, as well as the writer-director of movies like Dodgeball, We're the Millers, Skyscraper. So this is going to be an exciting conversation, I think.
I'm hoping the amount of people I get for the series will eventually accumulate in you bringing in someone like Pierce Brosnan.
I'm working on it. I'm in the shrubs outside his house right now.
So Cam, let's fire up the interview, and listeners will see you on the other side. And joining us now is writer, director, and actor Rawson Marshall Thurber. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm great, Scott. How are you? Thanks for having me.
I'm fine, thank you. So we're here today to talk about Central Intelligence. This is the movie we covered this week on SpyHards, but also your filmography and just about spy films as well. I have a litany of questions for you, but okay. I think Cam will start us off.
Well, so I guess with Central Intelligence, I think the core thing people want to talk about is the pairing of Dwayne Johnson and Kevin Hart. Now, you were like a real pioneer here. You figured it out, and since then, I mean, come on, Jumanji films, Hobbs and Shaw. Yeah. What was it about those two that you found in the process of putting this movie together? And then what do you think the spark was? Like, why does it work so well?
Gosh, well, I'll take the first part first, because the second part is either really hard to answer or too easy to answer. So the first part is, originally Central Intelligence wasn't designed for Dwayne Johnson or frankly Kevin Hart. The original draft was written by Ike Barinholtz and David Stassen, who are fantastic screenwriters and actors in their own right. And I think it might have been their first spec screenplay. And I remember I read it before I made a movie called We're the Millers, and I read it right before I went to go make We're the Millers. And I thought it was great. And I was like, oh, this is such a great idea, and it's so funny and well done. But it was already set up at Universal with, I think at the time, Ed Helms and Will Ferrell. I think that was the pairing. And I'll get to how it got to where it was. And so made a movie, and then New Line asked me what I wanted to do next. And I was hoping to kind of move from sort of straight comedy into action comedy, and then from action comedy into action, and then kind of building a bridge, right, career wise. And I just thought, I remembered how much I like Central Intelligence, and I thought the premise was so cool, and so I said that's the one I'd want to do next. And I think it was in turnaround at Universal, which means Universal had elected to not move forward making it, and so New Line went and grabbed it. But the original joke, in finger quotes, the original kind of comedy element of Central Intelligence was that the character of Bob Stone was sort of essentially written for Will Ferrell or a Chris Farley type. The joke was Fat Jason Bourne, right? Like this loser from high school that you meet back in at your reunion, who doesn't look like he could kick ass at all, is actually lethal, right? Like that was the joke. Just a fine joke. And then I rewrote, was working on it, rewrote it, and then Dwayne called me. He'd seen We're the Millers, and he wanted to do an action comedy, and he liked this idea, and he said, well, what do you think? And he's like the most charming guy in the world, by the way. If you ever get a chance, like he could sell sand at the beach, as they say. Super charming, and then it, like, this sort of big cartoon light bulb went off over my head, where I was like, oh my God, of course, like this is so much better, right? That if you were sort of overweight and picked on in high school, right, of course you're going to transform yourself into The Rock, right? Into this sort of chiseled Superman, as it were. But the heart of the movie is that though he looks the way he looks on the outside, on the inside, he's still the same guy. And that's his vulnerability. And he still has that same kryptonite as we see in the film. And to me, that was just like just a better take. Like I was like, oh, that's great. It's great for Dwayne. It's great for the heart of the film. And so I wrote to that. And so that's kind of how Dwayne came aboard. And then we were talking about, who would be a great foil for Dwayne. And there's a couple different names, but I'd always been a big Kevin Hart fan. And so was Dwayne. And so basically, like it was almost as simple as Dwayne and I drove to Kevin's office in the Valley, and we sat down and we were like, hey, we want to do this with you. And he was all in. And part of what was fun about it is, and I'll get to the pairing in a second, is that the part of the elements of Central Intelligence, are that we take the biggest action star in the world, Dwayne Johnson, and make him the funny guy, and we take one of the funniest people in the world and make him the straight man. And we thought that was a really interesting kind of way of doing it a little bit differently. But the last part you asked about, Jumanji having all the success, which, by the way, I take full credit for. I'm still waiting for my check. Is the fundamental, one of the key tenets of any buddy picture, which is what Central Intelligence is, right? And you can go back to On the Road with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby, right? Like the buddy picture premise, right? Is basically, what is that combustible cast? What is that pairing, right? That you want to see together? What are those two people that is sitting in a car you want to see together? Regardless of what necessarily the plot is, like, and that is really a function of casting. It's not a function of necessarily writing or directing. It's like, what is that pixie dust? What is that alchemy? And I knew from literally that first meeting in Kevin's office, I could see it, right? And they weren't even standing up. They were both sitting down at a table, and they just had this Kevin. I don't even know how to describe it. And then when they got up and they were standing next to each other, I was like, oh, well, geez, come on. And that's probably a long-winded answer to how we got there.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. I have half of the Bob Stone story. I haven't still turned into The Rock yet, but I am waiting for that to happen.
You'll get there. You'll get there, buddy.
Thank you. I mean, the question I had at this point is, obviously you had the idea of Central Intelligence, then you formed it into the script with The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and Kevin Hart. How much of a spy story was in what you got in the beginning towards what you put into the film yourself?
Yeah, well, the premise itself of the former sort of loser from high school comes back and is now a trained assassin. That was always there. That was there for the Ike and Dave draft, the original script. And then these very talented writers, Anders and Morris, wrote a second pass and still had that same premise. So that part of it never changed. But what the actual brute plot was in terms of the Black Badger and Bob not being trustworthy and et cetera, like that was something that I added as we went, sort of changing that plot a little bit.
How difficult is it when you're making the movie to balance between the spy plot and the comedy? Because if it's too much a comedy, people complain, well, the plot didn't matter. Or if it's too much of a spy plot, they go, well, it wasn't funny. So how cognizant are you during the process of making it?
Oh, that's a really great question, and it's second to casting, right? Second to getting that combustible pairing correct. It's the most important thing, which is tone, right? Like, what is the balance between shootout and hijinks, right? And that part of it is when you're talking about an action comedy is critically important, because if you go too silly, right, then the bullets don't matter, and there's no real tension. You're never really worried about anybody. And if you go too serious, then people don't laugh, which is what they want, right? So it's about striking that balance. And typically, what I try to do, at least, is make sure that the reaction that the heroes are having to to the bad guys is authentic, right? So that now they can have different reactions to the same stimuli, which in Central Intelligence they do, right? There's like this shootout at the office, and Kevin is freaking out as any of us would, and for Bob it's another day at the office, haha. So having different reaction to the same stimuli is incredibly important for those sort of buddy pictures, but making sure that reaction is authentic, and we don't make our villains too broad or too goofy, is important, because if you do that, then you suck the drama out of it. Now, I will say, obviously, Central Intelligence, like nobody's watching that movie expecting a hard-hitting spy picture, but you want it to function, at least nominally, in a way that keeps you, I wouldn't quite say worried, but at least engaged, right? And like, okay, how are they going to get out of this? Whether you're genuinely worried for their mortal safety or not. But one example in terms of tone for Central Intelligence specifically is there's a scene later in the film where Amy Ryan, who's a dream to work with, by the way, too classy for that film. She tortures Dwayne, right? And she breaks his finger. Now, you write that in the script, and you're like, she's torturing him, and how's she going to do it? And and then you're there on the day, and you start shooting it, and it can look really gruesome, like more gruesome than you think. And then when you're in the edit, you have to sort of mitigate what that is, right? So because if you went too gruesome, if you're suddenly in Syriana territory, where Clooney's getting his fingernails pulled out, which is a great torture scene, right? But that's not the movie. That doesn't feel good in this particular movie, right? Because then if you do that, then it takes a while to get your audience to come back and be able to laugh. So in that particular case, though I shot, you see his finger get cracked, we never show it, right? In that scene, you hear it, but you don't see it, and then you play it as a joke. And the next, I think a scene and a half later, where he lifts his hands up and Kevin jumps back, and then people enjoy that, and they get that laugh. But if you were to break his finger on camera, I think you would get a reaction from the audience, but I think it would also have a chilling effect on the enjoyment and the tone. So that's, there's a lot of those pieces throughout that trying to keep that balance alive.
Right. Very nice.
Well, at this stage, you've got a great script in place. You've got Kevin Hart, you've got Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. It's all looking great. Now you've got to assemble this cast of other great actors in this film as well. Yeah. Jason Bateman, Kamal Nanjiani, Melissa McCarthy. How did they all get involved in the picture?
I begged. Well, I know Bateman from Dodgeball. So he came in, and he was Pepper Brooks in the color commentator in my first movie, which was called Dodgeball, about adults hitting big rubber balls. Not a spy film, but and he was just amazing, and I've known him forever, and he's super smart and really nice and like really, really funny. And if you know him a little bit, he can be like deliciously mean funny in a way that I personally love. And so when we wrote the role of, essentially he's the grown-up bully, he was the only person I wanted to play that part. And so I called him up and asked him if he would do it, and he kindly agreed. So it was mostly a favor. I think he shot for 2 days or 3 days, 3 days, I think. And that scene where he, pretends to apologize and then pulls the mask off, and then you see that Bob is broken, right? That he's the same kid he always was, and is my favorite scene in the entire film for a couple reasons. One is I think just Bateman is so mean and funny in that, and when you watch it with an audience, there's about 8% of the audience that finds it really funny, and I'm in that 8%, and the rest of the people are like, clutch their pearls and are so they're so hurt that Bob would be treated this way. And you can see it when you watch people watch the movie, which I did as we were making it. When Bob sees his reflection, he's broken. Like, you can hear them go, oh, right. And that's a really important moment when you're making the movie, because when you have that reaction from the audience, you know that your characters work, right? You know that they care. And so to me, that scene is so pivotal because it lets me know who the mean people are in the audience who are laughing, like me. And then also, you know, if the movie's working, if we really care. So that's why I love it. It's the worst of the worst for our hero. It's the low point, and then very quickly after that, you know, Bob gets arrested, etc. But the other thing I love, which no one will ever see, is like it was basically like the first day. Jason, he would always do the script, but then he would just absolutely rip into Dwayne in the meanest, darkest, most personal ways. And most of those takes don't work because Dwayne can't stop laughing because it's so mean. But also it's like we couldn't go that dark for our film, but it was just delicious. And some of my favorite stuff that I never put in a movie and won't. So that's Jason. And then Kumail, you know, I didn't know Kumail at the time, and you know, we're friends now. And it was just an ask. It was like, you know, I saw him on Silicon Valley, and I'd seen some of his stand up, and you know, I didn't know if he would do it or not. And he agreed to do it. And then he came in and he just made it better than it had any right to be. You know, I think I think there's like a Snake Gyllenhaal line, and that's all Kumail. You know, so he's just basically a genius. So that was, you know, whew. And then the other one that you didn't mention, I'll talk about Melissa in a second, but the other one that you didn't mention was there's Ryan Hansen is in the movie. He plays sort of the office jerk next to Kev, and I knew him from Party Down and just thought he's just like the funniest guy. And he was so funny in the movie that my producing partner Bo Bauman and I were like, we gotta do something with Ryan. Like this guy's so funny. And then I was like, we got to make something for Ryan. And then I ended up writing and directing 2 seasons of Ryan Hansen Solves Crimes on Television, which is basically stars Ryan Hansen. So, which is not spy, but detective. Anyway, so that was that part. And then the last one for Melissa, I've known her for a long time. I mean, back when, you know, I was, you know, just starting out and she was just starting out, and she's just always the coolest. And that idea of Darla McGuckian, we always knew we wanted to find somebody for that role. And Melissa was my first and only choice. And that was the pickup we shot. Pickup is a reshoot essentially. We shot a day and a half on Central Intelligence. It was mostly just like inserts, and then that dance scene where Darla's there. And she agreed to do it because she, you know, who doesn't love Dwayne? And she came in and just, I mean, I wish you guys had gone through the experience of like screening the movie and it's all working, and it, you know, you're doing well, you're scoring well and all that. And then you go do a little bit of a reshoot, and then you put, you know, Melissa McCarthy in at the end. The first time we showed it, like 3 people stood up in their chairs and clapped. And you're like, yep, that's what she's there for. So anyways, that's how we got the sort of Murderer's Row.
I had a follow-up question, and I think you might have accidentally answered it, but I'll ask anyway. And it's about Jason Bateman. It's a bit of a nitty-gritty question, all right? So in the beginning of the film, you've got the flashback scene where everyone's in high school. But Jason Bateman isn't in the scene, whereas his character is.
Wait, how do you mean? Sorry.
So you've got the school bully. He throws Dwayne out into the middle of the basketball court. Yep. And that's Jason Bateman's character.
Yes.
But Jason Bateman his face isn't imposed on the character like all of our other characters.
Yes. Great point. Well, that's a great question. No one's ever asked me that, but the short answer, Scott, is money.
Okay.
You know, so there was a moment when you're developing the idea and you're talking with the studio, and there was a moment where the idea was discussed about just casting a young Dwayne, a young heavyset Dwayne. And it's something that I really fought against. It's like, well, we can't do that. Like this, we need it to be the same eyes that get humiliated at the beginning of the film have to be the same eyes that you're with and are redeemed at the end. And we can't just cast somebody else as young Rock and do it like that. I mean, you can, but you're just stealing the heart of the film. And so I dug in and you know, argued my artistic point, and the studio agreed. you know, but then you do that, then you obviously you have to have Kevin, so you have to de-age Kevin a little bit. I mean, not much because he's just, you know, he still looks like he's 18, but de-age Kevin. We have to put Dwayne's face on Sione Marashino's body, who's amazing, by the way. If you ever just YouTube, he's like one of the best dancers ever, light on his feet. But then it was just strictly, a matter of money. You know, you're just like, do we really need to put Jason Bateman's face on it? It'll cost, you know, $250,000. And at that point, you're fighting the battles that you can win. And that was it. So that's the inside baseball on it.
Following kind of up on that, just in terms of some of the casting stuff, I have to admire any filmmaker who decides to pit Dwayne Johnson against Aaron Paul in a fist fight and try to make it actually work. And it does work in the movie. But just in terms of being sort of slowly evolving into an action filmmaker at this point, you said this was kind of a bridge film. You wanted to prove that you could do action. And it's one thing I've noticed in your movies, whether it's Dodgeball or We're the Millers, is that there's a lot of style to the movies, and a lot of time comedy's considered kind of a visually, maybe a little less showy-offy than some of the other styles of film. And I was just curious, some of the lessons you learned doing action in this film that you've carried over into Skyscraper and the upcoming Red Notice.
These are great questions. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right on that. Most comedy, in terms of like the cinematic aesthetic, right? That's not the most important part, or a lot of times that's not given the attention that it needs. And I don't think there's necessarily any shame in that. I mean, I think part of it is that the sole function of a comedy should be to make you laugh, right? Job one is like, make sure people are laughing. And a lot of times when you move the camera, right? When you move the camera, the audience's mind is subtly recalculating all the time, right? So you're thinking, because the parallax is shifting, your brain, you're sitting in a chair, but the image is moving. So even subconsciously, your mind is catching up, right, with what's happening. And part of what's hard to do is to be thinking and laughing, right? A laugh is a reaction. You don't see something and think to yourself, oh, that's funny, now I elect to laugh, right? It is a reaction, right? In the same way that horror is a reaction. Horror and comedy are, a micron difference. They're both reactions to surprise. They're just different reactions, right? So in a lot of straight comedies, right, that sometimes the more that you move the camera, the less funny it is. And so you need to be a little careful in that way. Like if you look at Wes Anderson pictures, right, he's amazing. He shoots everything, I think, on a 35, and he center punches everything, right? It's a funny frame, but it's relatively still. And when he does move the camera, it's more of, it's more part of the aesthetic. It's usually sort of parallel dolly track moves, right, which are very storybooky and very sort of, I don't want to say simple, but very clean movement, I suppose. So when you're dealing with action and comedy, you need to make sure that that one doesn't screw up the other. So on Central Intelligence, I tried to make sure that that the comedy had a little bit of zhuzh to it, a little bit of style, so that when we went to the action sequences, it didn't feel like we're watching two different movies sort of checkerboarded. So it's about blending that. And then in terms of lessons that I took with me to Skyscraper, what was really fascinating to me about, and then into Red Notice, is the amount of support that you get when you're making an action film, right? When they're an action sequence, right? So Millers and Dodgeball and The Mysteries of Pittsburgh, I didn't have like a stunt coordinator necessarily. I mean, I did, but I didn't have like action sequences, right? We had storyboards and whatnot. But once you get to Central Intelligence, you get to Skyscraper, you have previs, you have storyboards, you have previs, you have postvis, you have visual effects people helping you. You've gone over it so many times, like, you've gone over the gag so many times, partly because so many people have to be involved, visual effects, special effects, stunts, etc., that and you also needed to be safe to perform, right? So there's so many conversations about it. So in that way, you get as a director, you get a ton more support on the action side than you do on the comedy side. So like a car's either going to blow up or it's not, right? The gag's either going to work or it's not. You're never going to go like, hey, could it blow up funnier? And so in that way, I felt so supported. Whereas like on the comedy side, it's just me. It's me and me listening and watching, and the actors, and trying to, there's no stunt coordinator help on that stuff. So there are different challenges. And so what I learned, a part of what I learned on Central Intelligence was that you get so much support on the action side with people who are wildly talented, that all you really need to be able to do is say, this is the feeling I want. I want it to look like this. I want it to feel like this. You watch other scenes, you look at other pictures, you go this, you practice it, you test shoot it, don't like it, you keep working. So there's so much support you get there that's one of the big lessons that I took to Skyscraper, and then certainly on Red Notice, which is bigger than all the movies put together.
Very nice.
I have one last Central Intelligence question, but Cam, do you have any ones as well?
Why don't we finish off Central and then move into Red Notice and what's coming up?
Okay. My question is, Central Intelligence 2, when's it happening? And is it about Danielle Nicolette's character becoming a spy as well? Because that's what I want to see.
Oh, bless your heart. Well, Danielle Nicolette is, I love her. She's a dear friend and like super awesome. Do you watch Flash? Do you see her on that show?
I saw the first season of it.
Oh, she's great. Anyhow, so we had an idea for Central 2 that I thought was super fun, and we flirted with it for a second, but then we just couldn't quite get all of the schedules to work together at the time. And part of what's if you're not going to reboot a show or a movie 20 years later, there's sort of a shelf life for when you can return to a sequel. Like typically, I think typically you want to be there 2 or 3 years after the first one, so people don't forget what they liked, right? But in terms of the take, it had Danny, it had Kevin, it had Dwayne, and it had Darla McGuckian. So it was going to be Melissa and DJ and Kevin and Danny, and it was going to be I won't pitch the whole thing, but essentially it was it was an international spy issue. And Melissa's character proposes to Dwayne's character. And so they're about to get married. And then it turns out Darla's not exactly who she said she was. And Dwayne is, Bob's sort of caught up in the whole mess. And he's a bit of a bridezilla as they're planning the wedding, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it was a pretty fun spy idea. But I don't think it's ever going to see the light of day. But thank you. I appreciate it.
It's sold. I've got about £10 I can lend if you want. We can get it made.
You're very kind, very kind. I'll put it in the kitty.
Yeah, I've got 10 Canadian, which is worth way less. So I want to talk about Red Notice, and yeah. I mean, this is your third major collaboration with Dwayne Johnson. Yeah. What keeps bringing you guys back together, and what can we look forward to with Red Notice?
Well, he keeps calling. That's the problem. I can't remember twice. This guy is super thirsty. It's just, I don't know, when you find somebody that you like working with, they're just hard to find, and especially someone who's the biggest movie star in the world who happens to like working with you and you like working with him. And it's just sort of, it's just luck at that point, right? Like I'd never worked with him before. And then Central Intelligence, we just, we both take the work seriously, but not ourselves seriously. And I think that we're kind of simpatico in that way. And so when we were making, for Skyscraper, when we were in post on Central, I pitched him Skyscraper. And then we were shooting Skyscraper in Vancouver, Cam, where you are. We went out to dinner. We had like a steak dinner in like back room in some steakhouse in Vancouver. And I pitched him Red Notice. He's got a steak and a big glass of tequila, and I, ordered my steak, but I have to pitch this idea. So like I can't eat anything. I'm like, my stomach's in knots. My, $80 steak is ice cold. And I'm pitch my little heart out about this new idea. And and somewhere, around near the end, I get to this one point and he just puts his napkin down, boom, stands up and goes, I'm in. And then I got really drunk at that point. So the Red Notice is he liked the pitch. And that's kind of how it went. And I don't know, I'm super grateful to get to work with him. Because, for a zillion reasons, for all the reasons that he's the biggest movie star in the world, part of, a big one is that all he cares about is the audience that's going to watch this movie. Like, it's never anything that he's coming with in terms of like, hey, what about this? What about that? It's not vanity. It's only about the story. And he doesn't care to look foolish. He doesn't care to be, he can be the hero in the scene. He can be the heel in the scene, but all he cares about is the movie itself. And that's paramount. And they're not all like that. And so it's nice to work with somebody who has the same priorities that you do. So that's why Dwayne.
And it's also exciting just to see, again, an original film at a time where those get fewer and, far between. And there are great franchise things out there, so I'm not down on franchises, but it is exciting just to see a filmmaker who's out there making original films, and to get basically the biggest movie star in the world signing on to do original films is a really awesome thing to see.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, I appreciate you noticing. Yeah, all of my movies, except for my second one, which was based on a novel, tiny little novel that I loved, were all original. And sometimes I wonder if that's the best move for me. It's a lot harder to push that rock up a hill than it is to go like, hey, you want to make this thing that already has a built-in fan base around the world, which I totally get. I'm not. I love those movies. I go see those movies, all that. But it's definitely a bigger risk anytime to make something original. And then for Red Notice, it's an original idea that I thought up in my own brain. But it's also it's got three of the biggest movie stars in the world. Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot, and it's not cheap. Like it's an expensive movie. And those are becoming rarer and rarer if it's not already IP. So I feel really, really lucky to get to do it, and I'm going to keep doing it as long as they let me.
Well, you work with Dwayne Johnson 3 times. I look also at Dodgeball. You've got Ben Stiller. You've got Jennifer Aniston, and We're the Millers. How vital is it to have stars of this caliber just to get original films made?
It's a very smart question. It's everything. The especially with original ideas, right? So in the crass sort of financing mind, right? They're betting on IP, right? Whether that intellectual property is Star Trek, Marvel, Candyland board game, right? They're betting on something. And in the same way, they're betting on the intellectual property, the brand of a star, whether that's Dwayne Johnson or Jennifer Aniston or Ben Stiller, right? So when you talk about an original movie, yes, it's an original idea. It's not based on anything, but anybody who's going to put their money up, the financiers always want to have something that the audience can connect to. We like Jennifer Aniston because she's awesome, so we're going to go see this thing. So either which way, they're betting on that. Now, of course, they're betting on a known, for lack of a better term, commodity, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there are other films that are all unknowns, and based on the story, that those are super rare and they're almost always very, very low budget. But that's also great. Like, those can be amazing, and you can have breakout stars from those tiny little little films, like Tigerland, which is one of my favorite Joel Schumacher films, right? That's a tiny little movie. Beau Flynn, who's producing Red Notice and produced Skyscraper, that was his movie, and Colin Farrell's in that movie, and he came out of nowhere and became a big star. So those are equally as important. But yeah, when you talk about original films, it's either at a certain budget level, right? Because Central was certain and Skyscraper was that you need to have something for the financier to feel comforted by, to feel insured by, as it were.
Right. Now, Scott, did you perhaps have some spy questions?
I did, but before we sign off on that, last time I checked, Red Notice is coming out on Netflix. Do we have a date for release yet?
We don't have a date. It will be this year, 2021.
Cool.
But seeing as how I'm just started my director's cut, I wouldn't. I don't think it's gonna be anytime soon this year. But it will be this year, and very, 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 very excited about it.
Cool.
Good stuff. Well, a couple of quick fire spy questions, as I know our time is short. Hot seat time. Favorite spy movie of all time?
Oh God, of all time. This is tough because this is like all spy nerds. I know I'm gonna get judged. Can I say No Way Out?
Oh, that's a really interesting choice. The Kevin Costner film.
Yes, I'm a huge Costner fan, always have been, and my dad loved that movie, and it's up there for me. I don't. If you're talking spy comedies, I would go Top Secret. If you don't mind. I don't know if it counts, but depends on where you draw the line. I don't know where you guys draw the line on spy pictures, but The Incredibles has kind of a spy element to it, superhero, and that's essentially a perfect film. Gosh, I guess that's probably there. I mean, there's a great. I don't know if you guys saw it. There was a great. I think it was German. So the Lives of Others about the Stasi in the 80s in East Germany. That I thought was just a fabulous white knuckle kind of spy picture. Gosh, I'm sure there's others. I'm sure I'm forgetting, Hitchcock and Wells and all that. But those are mine.
Okay, where do you come down on like James Bond, Jason Bourne? Is there any franchises that really jump out to you?
Oh, sure. Well, the Bond franchise, you just have to bow down. Nobody's done it better for that long. I cannot wait to see No Time to Die, and I've been just so bummed that they keep pushing it. I get it, but I think Cary Fukunaga is, one of the most talented filmmakers working today, and I can't wait to see what he does with it. So I'm super excited about that. And the last two Bonds, or two or three Bonds with Sam Mendes, I thought, he's fantastic, and Roger Deakins is maybe the greatest to ever do it. I will say that the Bourne franchise, I thought, breathed life into that genre in a way that we hadn't seen in so long. So Doug Liman's first one just kind of made you sit up straight because you hadn't be like, what is this? And then obviously Paul Greengrass with the next one. I don't know if he outdid him, but he continued that sort of freshness. And then for a while, you saw everybody ripping that off, right? They ripped that style off, which is just, the sincerest form of flattery. But it's also interesting, right? Because you talk about spy franchises, you could put Mission Impossible in that for sure, right? Which I also love. But when you look at the continuum of sort of fun popcorn to hard hitting, right? You'd put Mission Impossible kind of more to the sort of fun popcorny thing, right? It's fun. It's a little bit funny, but it's still serious when it needs to be. And they strike a great tone with that. And Chris McQuarrie is, basically a demigod of writing and directing. So I love that genre for its own thing. And then I would put Bond in the middle there, because it's definitely straight, but it has such a I won't say mausoleum, but an oeuvre of films that have come before it, that there's always a bit of a wink to it for the diehard fans. There's always a bit of cool to it. I forget which one it was where Bond jumps into the train that's torn off and he just adjusts his cufflink. There's always those little grace notes in it, right? They keep you laughing. And then obviously on the far right of the harder core kind of no laughs version, and then there's the Bourne franchise. And what I think is so cool about it is it's essentially, broadly speaking, one genre, but all three of these massively successful franchises have carved out their own niche, their own footprint, and they're all their own thing. And you wouldn't want any of them to be the other one, right? Because they all deliver a different taste. So they're all great. I'm a sucker for Mission just because I typically like a little more comedy in my stuff, a little more swashbuckly fun.
But if you have to ask, Also, who is your James Bond?
Oh, of everybody, you're not
Mhm.
gonna like my answer.
I might.
No, I grew up when I grew up, and so it's Roger Moore for me.
Same as me.
Is that right?
Same
So
boat. Yep.
it just depends on when you came of age, right?
Yep.
Like I appreciate the Sean Connery stuff. One of my dearest friends from high school is like a dyed-in-the-wool Bond, aficionado, and he's like, it's Connery or GTFO, and I respect it. But for me, it's for me, it's Roger Moore. I think we can all agree that it's not Pierce Brosnan. I think we can all agree.
My sister will love you for saying that.
I love Remington Steele. He's amazing. But
Yeah.
but it's just like once you've had Connery, once you've had Roger Moore, and I think Daniel Craig's great. And I can't wait to see who's next. I can't if you guys could, I'm sure you've had this conversation 100 times. If you could pick the next Bond, who would she be?
I don't know. The thing is, if you'd have asked me when, Pierce Brosnan's getting ready to leave or getting ready to be cut loose, frankly, at the end of Die Another Day, who I would say, my answer would never have been Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
I would have been saying whoever, Ray Fiennes maybe at that point or something like that. And so I just kind of count on them to surprise me because, you look at even when Roger Moore gets hired, you don't look at Sean Connery or Lazenby and say, well, he clearly follows in the mold of those guys. So I'm just kind of hoping whatever it is, it grabs me in the way that Daniel Craig has.
Yep. I mean, Scott, what do you think?
I appreciate that point of view. I like the left field choice. I'd like to not know who it is, frankly. I don't want to have a guess because then I know them too well.
Yep.
The one I see getting floated around a lot is Richard Madden, who was in Game of Thrones. I think he's fabulous. He was also in Bodyguard as well, the BBC drama. Fantastic.
Yep.
That could be interesting.
For sure.
We'll see how it goes. I would just be happy to actually get to see No Time to Die, but we can all understand what's going on right now. So
yeah.
Is this Daniel Craig's last one? I'm not up on it. Is it a wrap after this?
Yeah. This is it.
It's a nice way to go out.
Yeah, hopefully he goes out on a high because very few Bonds go out on a high.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a really interesting point. I don't know. That trailer looked great, and I cannot wait to see it when it comes out.
He would be the one to break the streak, so I'm excited too. But thanks so much for talking to us. This was a blast.
Pleasure. Yeah, great to meet you guys. Thanks for having me.
No, it was our pleasure for sure.
All right.
Thank you, Rawson. Thank you.
Take it easy, boys. See you later.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye. So there we have it. That was the second interview as part of our SpyMaster interviews series with Rawson Marshall Thurber. What a fantastic chat that was.
Yeah, that was a really interesting chat. Just about, you look at a movie like Central Intelligence that I think a lot of people would just dismiss and be like, oh, yeah, that's just a kind of a goofy comedy. But it's really interesting when you actually talk to the creator about the thought processes that went on in terms of the development and the creation of it. And just that balancing act between a spy film and a comedy that, again, I don't know if a lot of people think about when they watch a movie like this.
No, I remember I was speaking to someone on Twitter this week who actually assumed this film was just a buddy cop drama. And it partly is a buddy cop drama, but it has this spy story running throughout, which we commented on in our original episode covering the film. But I think Rawson had a really tough act to sort of juggle those two things together.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, right? Like the arena is littered with spy films where they went, far to one side or the other, right? And I do think Central Intelligence actually balances its elements really well, and also doesn't prey victim to something that tends to annoy me in comedies, particularly action comedies, I should say, which is that the action feels kind of, I don't know, it doesn't have a lot of tension or excitement to it because of the fact that the tone of the movie goes a little too goofy, where I'm not really buying into the pyrotechnics and the car stunts and all that sort of thing. But I actually think that was a very well-achieved balancing act in Central Intelligence.
But, Whoopi Goldberg in a phone booth was absolutely fine.
Well, there's one, that felt a little too goofy where I go, okay, well, the stunt looks like it took some effort, but I'm not really getting a lot out of it.
No, apart from a few laughs, I would say.
Yeah. And it's going to be interesting because obviously there's so many spy comedies, and it becomes this question of like, why do they keep making them? Like, obviously there is terrain here that is interesting for filmmakers to continue to mine. And I mean, when I was watching Central Intelligence, I can't say that I was ever like, I've seen this exact same thing done before. The whole high school angle, it was fresh and interesting.
Yeah, it gives the story a sense of tension, that there's something bigger going on, and it propels the story throughout the film. I think if it was just like a high school reunion story about The Rock and Kevin Hart without the spy thing going on, it would have been a lesser film.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was really interesting to hear him talk about his collaborations with Dwayne Johnson because, yeah, as we say in the interview, Dwayne Johnson, biggest star basically in the world at this point at the box office, highest paid movie star, I believe, too. And they've worked on 3 movies together. And I do wonder if this collaboration is going to continue into the future. And I kind of dig the idea of using Johnson's clout to make original films.
Yeah, because we touched on that in the interview, and it was a really interesting point to sort of delve into, that all of his films have been originals.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic thing to have on your resume, and all credit to him, because it'd be so easy for him to take a Marvel film, and he might take a Marvel film down the road, or Star Wars, Disney film, whatever you want to call them. But he's had successful films, and he's got another one coming out on Netflix this year that are all fresh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know if Red Notice will apply for SpyHards, but I'm kind of hoping it does because I think I would just like to have that conversation and talk about it in relation to something like Central Intelligence. But I guess the future will reveal whether that's the case.
And we, of course, heard about the original version of the story that featured Ed Helms and Will Ferrell.
Yeah, I think we theorized in the episode too about because Ed Helms had like a producer credit, and we were debating which character he would have been playing. And I think I said probably the Kevin Hart one. I don't. I think that's accurate, right?
It's interesting because the original story as well that we were talking about with Rawson was that the CIA agent was overweight, but then he never lost the weight. It was more just a joke about like a fat Jason Bourne.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because he said it was kind of a Chris Farley type character.
Yeah, but neither Ed Helms nor Will Ferrell are particularly oversized or known for playing oversized characters. So I'd be interested to know if that was a part of the story that was in between that stage, or if one of them was just going to be bigger for the film. But I would have thought with Will Ferrell would have been Dwayne Johnson's character.
Yeah, I think so. Do you think Will Ferrell chose not to do this film because he did The Other Guys with Mark Wahlberg, which is that cop buddy movie, and maybe it was like, it's a little too similar to that one?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. That's a really good shout. It definitely could have been that. Also, there's the whole is anyone buying the fact that Ed Helms and Will Ferrell went to school together?
I don't know. They asked me to believe a lot of these people went to school together in Central Intelligence, so
That's true.
I mean, you are right though. There is a fairly significant age difference there. I think isn't like Will Ferrell like 10 years older?
I would have thought it was more. Not to age up Will Ferrell. I just always assumed he was in his 50s, whereas Ed Helms was like early 40s, maybe.
Poor Will Ferrell. He's actually in reality like 10 years younger than Ed Helms.
10 years younger than you.
Will Ferrell, that fresh-faced young go-getter.
He's really up and coming in Hollywood.
That's right. That kid's got moxie.
And the other thing that really jumped out to me on the interview as well, before we got to the other spy stuff, was how he pitched Red Notice to The Rock.
Yeah.
Just the idea of pitching The Rock over a steak dinner that I imagine, The Rock is known for working out and eating, and that's just I imagine him just devouring the steak and drinking this whole like jug of tequila, and there's this mountain of a man in front of you, and you're like, hey, would you like to do my film, please? And the guy's just like staring at you, just munching his steak down. What an intimidating scene that is.
I don't know. Is The Rock intimidating though?
I mean, you clearly do not smell what The Rock is cooking.
That's very true. Very true. I don't know. He seems so like overly joyous all the time that I'm like, maybe he's just not intimidating at all. He just comes across as just like the happiest, most go-lucky, guy in the room.
I could see him doing like the intense stare down until he decides to give you the yes, and then he's like, yeah, and then like hugs you and picks you up and throws you around like a rag doll.
One thing I was very curious about too, just when listening to him talk about working with Dwayne Johnson, was he saying, how much he's focused on the audience when they're making a movie and how intense he is at trying to achieve, in many ways, perfection for an audience experience. And I began to wonder to myself, it wasn't a question I could ask really. Um, I'm wondering how much Dwayne Johnson is similar to someone like Tom Cruise, where they give so much of themselves to the process of these films that it's almost like we can't even really comprehend it, because when you see their public persona, it seems so larger than life and kind of they don't quite seem to be operating on our normal mortal level. But I can completely buy that they're very intense on the set and focused at delivering, I mean, spectacle that will wow an audience.
I mean, they've both got a proven track record of knowing what works for them and having good films and good successes with it. And they've had a few duds each,
Hmm.
um, but it doesn't mean they weren't driven to make it work. It just didn't work that time.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and they keep swinging. And I can believe, that I don't know when Tom Cruise is making like Far and Away, which was kind of a critical bomb back in the day, that he was putting all of his effort into making that a great movie. It just didn't work out for him, and I would suspect the same with Dwayne Johnson. On some of the movies he's had that maybe didn't pan out great.
And again, you got to tip your hat to Rawson. The sheer fact that the highest paid actor in the world wants to work with you 3 times, or
Hmm.
and more potentially. That's a tip of the hat that
Yeah.
anyone should be proud of.
Oh, totally, totally. And a lot of directors have their go-to leading men or women. You think of the great collaborators over the last handful of years. You have like the Scorsese and DiCaprio, or Scorsese and De Niro back in the day. I think it's really awesome when you get these director actor pairings, and just to see how their projects evolve and how they don't replicate themselves. Like, I've seen Skyscraper, I've seen Central Intelligence. Those two movies are not the same thing.
Hmm. Wasn't the other one that springs to mind Robert Redford and Sidney Pollock?
Yeah, that's another one for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, that's. Did Sidney do 3 Days of the Condor? Am I forgetting that?
he did. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a connection there. And of course, we also spoke about spy movies. How could we not? It's what we do. And usually, when we have guests on, or we interviewed Nicholas Meyer in the first part of the series, we like to ask them what their favorite spy movies are. And I'm often surprised by choices, because usually you think people will go for Casino Royale, great film. Um, but Rawson came out with his favorite spy film is No Way Out.
Yeah, which was an exciting thing for me to hear. I haven't seen No Way Out. I do have a copy on my shelf for when we cover it in the future, but it's one I've heard name checked a lot over the last handful of years. And I'm very excited to dig into it. I love hearing titles like this thrown out. Even when Nicholas Meyer was throwing out Little Drummer Girl, the book, it made me more interested in watching the Little Drummer Girl, the movie, because that's one when I added it to the list initially, because we do have a master list of spy movies to cover in the future. When I added that one, it meant nothing to me. I'm like, I haven't heard of this movie. It's a Diane Keaton film. Okay, sounds cool. We'll cover that at some point. And then to hear Nicholas Meyer throw that one out made me that much more jazzed. And that was the same. I had the same effect here, hearing No Way Out thrown out.
Well, Cam, you can put the DVD of No Way Out under your pillow, along with the book of Little Drummer Girl.
I swear I own that book.
We want pictures to prove it. Thank you.
Yeah, no kidding.
And
Yeah.
of course, his favorite James Bond is, of course, your favorite too.
I kind of expected this because I believe he's a few, just a few years older than me, and I fall on the tail end of Roger Moore, right? Like, I'm seeing View to a Kill when I'm younger, but like the last Roger Moore's in '85, so he would have been watching them probably around that sort of Octopussy, For Your Eyes Only, View to a Kill kind of period. So it makes a lot of sense.
He was born in 1975.
Yeah, yeah. So it does line up. That the whole video store era. Those are the ones he probably would have been seeing when he was quite young.
And he, of course, trashed Pierce Brosnan, which hurt me to my core.
Yeah, I feel like we may hear more of that in the future. Poor Pierce.
I will keep fighting Pierce's corner. I have Mamma Mia and Mamma Mia 2 on Blu-ray.
Oh, wow.
I wish I was kidding.
What about Detonator?
That one hasn't exploded onto my screens just yet.
I appreciate the pun.
Yeah, you're welcome. Dante's Peak was quite good, though.
Yep. I have nothing but love for Pierce Brosnan, so that's why I'm in the shrubs outside his house right now. So I mean, I'm I'm excited to cover more Pierce Brosnan, but yeah, I think this may be a common opinion we hear.
And to be fair, there's nothing wrong with it. And the only other major scoop we got out of it was the little tidbit of what Central Intelligence 2 could have been.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always curious to see how they would build upon that because I'm someone who generally doesn't I mean, it's very hard for me to find comedy sequels that I like because a lot of comedy sequels are just trying to repeat the dynamics or the jokes of the original. If you really go down the list historically, there's very few comedy sequels that anyone thinks are particularly great. But I did appreciate that where he was thinking of taking it felt like a story evolution as opposed to what happens if they were in another type of job or another type of mission. Like it felt different.
I did actually have a somewhat of an idea written down if we did go that way in the conversation. Would you like to hear it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so my pitch was, and I sort of hinted to it when we were speaking to Rawson, was that we didn't really hear much about Danielle Nicolette's job in the first film. So we could maybe make it that her job is bought out by some company, and this company turns out to be owned by some, mustache twirling Blofeld type, if you will. And they need Danielle Nicolette to go undercover to the headquarters to, expose everything. But you can't send Kevin Hart as her husband. You have to send The Rock.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah.
And you stick Kevin Hart in the van. He's your man in the van. It writes itself.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
Probably not as funny as Rawson's pitch, but hey, I'm not a screenwriter.
Yeah, his pitch with Melissa McCarthy in a larger role, I think that might have done really well.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, we were so thrilled to have Rawson join us for a good 40 minutes talking about a film that he clearly loved doing and we love talking about.
Yeah, any chance we can get to bring a filmmaker or actor for that matter, we'll see what the future holds, who helped bring a spy movie to life, I think is really great for all of you because I know there's a lot of spy fans out there who want context and information regarding what went on behind the scenes. We can only, we give our, own research on the podcast or, theorize what may have happened in certain situations. But it's great when we can have the filmmakers come on and really lay it out and kind of let us into their heads and let us know where they were when they were putting these projects together. So I do look forward to doing more of that in the future.
Yeah, we have our eyes set on a few people. Dabney Coleman, we're looking at you. And we would love to speak to them. But again, we were so thankful that Rawson could join us. Thank you, Rawson. And I think that wraps us up, Cam.
I think it does.
So there we are. That was part 2 of our SpyMaster interview series. Thank you for listening. If you want to hear more from us, you can find us at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, you can join us on Tuesday for From Russia with Love, the Sean Connery film from 1963. But until then, listeners, don't get caught dancing in the showers.